Insured Nomads proudly supports the new Nomad podcast. Insured Nomads for the evolution of insurance, for the revolution of travel. For all your travel, medical, and support needs, please visit our website at insurednomads.com. We support our location-independent community worldwide.
Welcome to the new Nomad podcast, hosted by Alan and Andrew of Insured Nomads. Join us as Alan and Andrew interview and explore the community of people and ideas that embody the nomadic spirit. Tune in to incredible discussions with thought leaders each week that will help you take full advantage of the cross-border remote work lifestyle. Now here are your hosts.
Welcome to another episode of the New Nomad podcast. Ixo Szapar will join us today, CEO of Remote How, somebody who is a big leader in the remote work movement, wrote a book, Remote Work is the Way. He's been a slow mad. Got some really interesting findings. Actually, I was really interested. I looked at his LinkedIn. He posted something interesting I also thought was like 87% of employees find themselves as productive and only 12% of leaders believe that fact. So we're going to have some great conversations today. Yes, that's quite a big divergence in perspective. Andrew, you've been a big purveyor of remote work, travel, and exploring the world. Hearing those type of numbers, does that surprise you that people perhaps maybe who have not been working remotely would look at kind of productivity level and kind of think it's less productive than it actually is?
I believe that statement is very true in many cultures, many corporate cultures. I recall a time when I was the first remote worker for a company, and the leadership felt fought against it when I requested to work remotely, and still all throughout my time there felt that, there's a big mistrust factor, except for my direct report who saw the results, and I was like, no, you are productive. You are bringing it in. So I believe in that statement for sure. This is going to be fun because I know that the leadership of the Remote First Institute is something that he'll be able to talk about, and so much more that's happening in this movement around the world. It's not new, but it's in the spotlight for many people. So this is going to be a great conversation to see what he gets to bring to our audience. Thanks for listening, and be sure and subscribe, share it, write a review, all that kind of stuff. But it's great to have this guest with us today.
So let's bring Ixo in. And Ixo, you've run distributed teams in 128 countries. You've written a book. You've done studies. And what's interesting, I talk to people, it always seems to be the focus is on productivity. But, as I talk to leaders also, there has to be something to happiness of your employees, people wanting to work for your company. And then I'll even get into the monetary issues is, having big office buildings in expensive cities is also a cost that needs to be brought into the picture too. Not just the other things of, I don't see my people every day. You kind of got to trust your workers. So you know more about this than we do. What's your thoughts on what's going on with people's perspectives here?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. And what we see today is a couple of things. So first of all, people are afraid of change, just in general, no matter work, life. And this is what happened out of the blue in 2020. So there was no more discussion. Should we be working remotely or not? It just happened, right? But right now, because it might become permanent, people are afraid. And especially leaders. Why leaders are afraid? Because first of all, they're afraid that they will lose control. Why? Because in most cases, they don't trust their employees that they're actually working. Why this is happening? Because unfortunately, many team leaders are simply bad managers. They're not mentors. They don't know how to organize day-to-day work. This work is very synchronous. It's hard to define goals. And the list goes on and on, right? They don't know how to build the culture, etc. and stuff, right? So if you look at the perspective of like, hey, let's go back to the old good times. We're just coming to one place. And in theory, the work was happening. This is kind of this feeling that right now we see. But there is a huge mistake with this thinking because we are assuming that in the office, the work was happening and we were super productive, efficient, and that was the paradise, right? And because we've been doing this for so long with Remote How, since 2017, one of the themes that we kept hearing before 2020 was like this sentence, I need to get stuff done. I will work from home today. And it was insane when I keep hearing this because the office was supposed to be the place where you work, right? So it's a huge shift. People are afraid of the change. People in control are afraid that they will lose the control. On the other side, the study that you mentioned showing that people are productive. This is the study by Microsoft, over 20,000 people surveyed. So this is a legit data because employees are still dictating terms. And this is a good thing. And they learn that there is a huge positive impact on their life if they can work remotely. They can do other things before work, during work, after work, that there is a better work-life blend, and the list goes on and on the benefits. There is a clash. And this is what we see now. And that's also one of the reasons why we decided to launch Remote First Institute, because the world needs us, that the remote community, the experts, the practitioners, to come together and really to help the market overcome these challenges.
Ivo, I even think about it today. So here in the United States, there's a hurricane going through Florida. And if everybody worked at a centralized location in, let's say, for instance, Naples, you'd be out of business. And then if you have a distributed team that works remotely, it gives you redundancies, it gives you backups, it gives you safety. And when I see a study like that, to your point, I think there are certain managers who like to manage by the old fashioned, by walking around. And, even in this remote work area, you can manage by walking around, by virtually checking in with people, right? I mean, is it that different other than bringing people to a centralized location where actually I think even during the pandemic, you bring 400 people together in a building and one of them has COVID. All of a sudden you have 100 people with COVID. I mean, I just don't understand how people could say centralized is better.
Yeah. So a lot of the things, if we are past the mindset phase, right? So if it's okay, let's do it. Let's learn how to do it. It's actually about relearning how you're working. The legacy of inefficiencies that existed for years, for decades, they're still with us. And of course, leadership part is one of them. Internal processes, how we communicate, how we build the documentation inside the company, and the list goes on and on. Those are all the things where the location doesn't matter. It's simply we need to know how we should be working. And this is the time to relearn, right? So there is this huge experiment that happened within the last 2.5 years that we can work remotely. And right now we just need to understand that there will be time that is needed, resources to relearn. And location teams that are still looking to meet in person or employees, this is totally fine. We're not saying that the offices should be gone and we should forget about this concept. No, absolutely not. What we're saying is that you should have a freedom of choice. And if you're choosing the office, that's amazing. If you're choosing a co-working space, beach, woods, mountains, that's also great, right? Or if you're choosing your own home, right? Because at the end of the day, you have a goal or multiple goals to hit throughout your month or quarter. And this is what you should focus on. And the manager should build an environment where you feel happy, where you feel supported, and you're focusing on your outcome. Those are the basics, and those are the things that are completely unrelated to remote work itself. Those are the things that we should be doing anyway. But because of this shift and because of this pushback, when we're talking about best practices, they're like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But yes, it completely makes sense. It doesn't matter where you are. This is how you should be working. So when you look at the companies like Doist, like GitLab, who are extremely proficient in how they're working, this is the work culture or work culture examples that we should be looking and be inspired and start implementing things rather than having the discussion where people are and how we're tracking them, etc. And one of the things, to your point about checking in, I would actually argue that we should change the way how we are managing and communicating from a very synchronous way. So checking in, messaging, calling, having unexpected meetings, etc., into a more async way where we are sending thoughtful messages. It can be written messages, it can be video, right? Have an internal policy around communication. There is an SLA, service level agreement, that if it's urgent, you need to respond within 5 minutes. But if it's about a workshop that is happening in a month, you can respond tomorrow or even in 3 days, right? But because this is a behavioral change and a lot of people need to relearn or learn completely new habits, new rituals, it simply will take time, and it's not just happen. It doesn't happen just with a click, right? So it's a process, and some will.
It is. Yeah, I've attended some events that you've coordinated, you and your team at Remote First Institute. And it's interesting. You get in that atmosphere and your mind shifts.
Yeah.
You realize some things, some behaviors that need to be changed. And I've got plenty of those. So getting into those environments, we get fertilizer for our mind, for our hands to shift how we operate. Can you tell us a bit more about Remote First Institute, what the goal is? I've seen it. The founding members are outstanding. They are voices to be listened to. Dive into that a little bit, if you will.
Yes. A couple of months ago, when more and more reports start to come with the predefined thesis that we should be going back to the office and this is the only option moving forward, we were like, hey. So the office lobby is pushing their narrative. They're spending millions of dollars on PR, while on the other side, the remote work community is doing a lot, but it's not super coordinated, and a lot of the projects are driven from the commercial side because those are the tech companies. They're of course offering certain products, etc. So we decided that we need to come together, build something that is not for profit with a couple of goals in mind. So first of all, the big picture counterattack that the global back to the office movement, because the work can be done from anywhere and we should be thinking about optimizing how we work and not where we work, creating global standards on remote work that are remote first. We have a lot of knowledge out there. In many cases, those are pretty vague blogs where it's like top 10 tricks on doing ABC, right? But if you then dive deeper and look into tactical aspect, like, okay, like how this process should look like, how should I communicate it within the company, how it should be run, what kind of tools, etc., then it becomes tricky. So building this kind of Bible, this kind of a playbook, right? Handbook, that's kind of another aspect. And then, of course, around all of this, bringing people together from all over the world through the events that you, Andrew, mentioned, the workshops, keynotes, networking sessions, deep working sessions, roundtables, to enable people to share, the ones that are experienced and been doing this for years, and enable the ones that want to ask questions directly and discuss, and then implement something, and then come back together. Hey, this worked, but this didn't. What can I improve, etc. Right? The era of watching videos and then saying, okay, I've watched the video on how to run a meeting, that means I know how to run a meeting, is over, and that people are sick of watching instructional videos. People prefer to have a live interaction, to be able to ask questions and then implement and then come back, etc. So we are building this environment where companies can meet with experts and actually go remote first. Super early days. We just launched not even 3 weeks ago, but the response is amazing. And we're looking to produce also researches around remote work, host summits, build a lot of the tools that will be open source to the community, because the power that the community had before pandemic, that the remote work community, was amazing. And right now we want to bring this power, bring this knowledge, and share it with as large community as possible all over the world.
So you keynoted something that ties into your comments is recently, how to successfully implement remote first rituals for your company. Now, Andrew and I work at a remote company. We have our people all around the world, and we do a period of gratitude often before we start into business. We do some virtual events where we get together in our offices and we all come together in the virtual conference room and enjoy each other. Do you have a couple of tips for folks who are starting off on some of the rituals that you think help bring teams together based upon your keynote and some of your findings?
Yes, there are a couple of them really simple. So one thing they really like is a ritual called the daily check-in and check-out, which means that when you're starting your day, either you're using Slack, MS Teams, no matter that communication system, you're posting a message. This is my check-in. This is what I'm planning to do on this specific day. You can link it to your project management tool. You can list your meetings, etc. Right? But it needs to be super specific, right? And then at the end of the day, you're sending a checkout. This is what I've done. This is what I haven't done because of some problems, right? It's super simple, but it creates transparency of work for everyone on your team. If it's a company, for the whole company, depends on how you want to structure this. It builds trust because people are committing. So it builds also accountability. This is my plan for today. But then at the end of the day, maybe I've done everything, maybe not, but at least I'm transparent about this, right? So it's super simple. Teams are starting to implement it and they see results immediately. And especially it's really good for the manager who has some challenges with the things that I've mentioned. So this will be a super easy ritual to implement. Another one they really like is called the deep working session. So people are coming together for 55 minutes to an hour. They're sharing at the beginning of the call what they plan to achieve. They're putting their phones away. They're muting notifications, and I will write 10 slides. I will reply to 10 emails. It's like super, super specific. If there are more than like 5 to 10 people, so it doesn't get like too much time in the beginning to share, you can also write it on chat. You turn off your video, you turn off your microphone, you're putting the music in the background, and then people are just working. At the end, you're sharing what you've managed to do and what were the results. Super easy, 2 rituals on productivity. And then maybe another one more general around communication, because companies need to switch to more async communication. And there are a lot of small best practices and kind of rules that you need to follow. We encourage companies to enable people to give direct feedback if someone is not following the rules, right? Now, my favorite way of doing this, so I will give you an example. You should be writing messages in the same thread, right? So I'm sending the message and then we should continue in a thread. And if someone is not responding in a thread, then I'm sending my GIF with a hash Slack police. And those are like the 2 cops that are looking at you, right? So it's a super simple way every day to remind people that, hey, we agreed on doing something in a specific way. And then we enable anyone to just remind each other that we should be doing this. So kind of like a small ritual for everyone. Because at the end of the day, there are a lot of things that we should be doing, but everyone should be the ambassador of the change. You should be doing things, but you should be supporting others in these tiny rituals. So yeah, the list is super long. We don't have much time, but I hope that these examples are helpful.
Ivo, very helpful. What's the position of the Institute or the findings on the 4-day work week versus the 5-day work week?
Yeah, to be honest, it's currently a bit out of our scope, but I'm personally a huge believer in the 4-day work week. And you can see studies all over the place proving that productivity is the same, the happiness goes up, engagement goes up, etc. So I totally believe that this is the future. It's kind of another shift that needs to happen. So companies might feel overwhelmed, like remote work and now working less. And what's next? Not working at all. Or so it will be a slow revolution. But looking at the experiment that is happening right now with I guess 80 different companies in US and UK, and it's growing, and the first results are super promising. This is the future, and companies management that understands that this is the way to go will benefit a lot when it comes to talent attraction and talent retention. Same as CEOs, remote companies were doing before March 2020. It's kind of a similar approach here.
Yeah, this is interesting. I've noticed myself on weeks where there's a holiday, and in some area of the world where I end up taking that day as a holiday, and it's a 4-day week versus a 7-day week for me. It's a 6-day week. And sometimes it's when you're running movements and different enterprises, you end up working 7 days. But a holiday brings it into where you have a 6-day week. Boundaries, truly.
Yes, and to your point, this is kind of like we're talking a lot about the positive sides of remote work, but we also need to be aware that there are pitfalls or potential pitfalls. And the one that you mentioned, like overworking, working too much, and then burning out. This is something that also needs to be taken into consideration, and the company needs to build the environment that monitors that and supports if there's such need for an intervention.
Well, it's easy. Interesting, because I worked for a period of time in a test project of the 4-day work week, except what we did at our company was 4 days at 10 hours. So we didn't change the hours at all. And I'm hearing more people saying about the 4-day work week. So it's kind of like, what really changed other than the folks that had really long commutes? This was back in the center. They appreciated it because if you're driving an hour, you don't mind working 10 hours and then having a Monday or a Friday off. But to me, and I think we all live this, is even on our days off, even on our vacation day, like Andrew described, he probably is checking the computer and taking care of issues for an hour or two.
I'm deleting. So I started this thing. I think it was like 2 years ago or something. So I delete all my work related apps from my phone, completely deleting them when I'm going on vacation. And then this year, I started to do it also on Fridays. So Friday afternoon, I'm deleting 4 or 5 apps and then reinstalling them on Monday. Yes, I know that I can snooze notifications, etc., but sometimes it's too tempting. So I'm just deleting and then coming back to this on Monday.
That's wild. So our podcast is also not always about remote work, but about visiting and going to different locations. So you've lived remotely in 17 or 18 different countries. For our audience, do you have a couple of suggested locations that people would want to consider if they were to follow this lifestyle that you felt of those 17 countries were really good? And maybe even a couple that you might say, hey, this might be a little harder than you expect to work remotely in.
Yes. So we lived for 1.5 years in Vietnam. So this will be my number one recommendation, especially Hoi An, so the central Vietnam. Everything is amazing there, starting from weather, landscape, people, food. Of course, the internet is super fast. There are co-working spaces. There is actually also an expat community in Hoi An. So everything clicks there. Big fan of the culture that is in Vietnam, which is about community first. So it's completely different than our Western culture that it's about me, 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 me. So that's also a big change in the perspective when you live there. So that would be number one. Very close to Vietnam, a place that I wouldn't recommend, Cambodia. I wouldn't recommend because of the issues with the electricity, which then impacts internet. So you're not actually able to work. And also that the government there did a big mistake that Chinese companies are allowed to buy land, and then they buy land and then build casinos. And there is this one place where they are building currently over 150 casinos, which was just a very calm and charming fisherman village, right? So Vietnam, absolutely yes. Cambodia, not so much. Places that I would also recommend, obviously Bali, but here you need to be careful because this is like a go-to place for digital nomads, so it can get crowded and can get crazy. But there's still, this is an amazing culture, amazing place to go. Thailand, but specifically one island. Big fan of Koh Phangan, so it's next to Koh Samui. Great co-working places, chilled vibes on the west side of the island, yoga, beautiful beaches, and then on the east side, crazy moon party, so you can choose whatever you want. Then I think also coming back to Europe, Portugal, a big one, not just Lisbon, but there are more and more places, also including Madeira, their island. Everyone knows Canary Islands, but there are many islands. So which one? So I would suggest Tenerife because it's both green. You can also surf, and there's community. Also very interesting community that's happening in Gran Canaria that Nacho built around there. People. What else? I'm a big fan of Italy, but because of food and the vibe.
Yes,
rather,
I'm with you there. But if there is an overlooked person or place, even experience that you feel like that our listeners should put on their calendar next year, what would you think that would be?
Yes, 200%. Northern Vietnam at the border with China on motorbikes. Basically, we spent a month there working and traveling. You can go from Hanoi to Sapa, and then you can travel around Sapa, and then you should do the Ha Giang loop, which is basically like a loop that it can take you from 3 days to 3 weeks, depending how many stops you take. Amazing views. Basically, like every day, it looks like you're in a different planet. People in Vietnam are amazing everywhere, super welcoming. The food is amazing everywhere as well. And the internet connection is also good. So it's not maybe a place where you will be working 8 hours a day. I mean, you can. And I was doing this because I was waking up at 5:30, and then our whole crew, because we're like 10 or 12 people, were still sleeping. I was doing the stuff, and then we're hitting the road, and then later on as well. But it's totally doable. The time when to go there, we were there in October, November, and that's actually the time when there are typhoons hitting the central Vietnam. So also with Vietnam, it's really good to look up the weather, because it's, for most of the year, it's hot, but then there's rainy seasons that differs depending if it's south, north, or central Vietnam. But definitely Ha Giang Loop, Sapa, northern Vietnam, close to the border with China, outstanding experience on motorbikes. So I strongly encourage everyone to check this out.
Ivo, that sounds great, because I'm going to be in Hanoi in January and heading on to Cambodia. So I was taking copious notes on your comments there.
Please do. Connect with me later on, and I will send you the full info.
That would be fantastic. So for folks who want to connect with you and Remote How, please share with us how they can touch with you and also perhaps get a copy of your book, Remote Work is the Way.
Yes, probably the best way is LinkedIn. So just find me, Ixo Szapar, on LinkedIn, or you can go to our website, remote-how.com. If you're interested in joining the community of the Remote First Institute, it's remote-first.institute. The book Remote Work is the Way is available on Amazon and millions of other places that I'm not even tracking. Yeah, and if you have any questions or maybe challenges within your team, within the company, I'm always more than happy to help or connect you with one of our experts to help you make remote work work.
Ivo, thank you very much. Very enlightening. So Andrew, as we always tie together, what did we learn today?
There were some good points on techniques for the check-in, check-out that I took note of, because that is the element of transparency and trust, and because some people don't trust by nature, because they're still apprehensive. Are people actually doing anything because I can't see them? So that's a big factor when you know people are working hard, but yet others on the team are kind of curious of what are they doing? That stood out to me. This has been so much fun hearing some of the nuggets of experience that have been brought out. How about you, Alan? What's one of the takeaways that you...
I love that too, because what Ivo mentioned also about the check-in and check-out is every day I do a little less, technology. I write down on my little pad, here's the things I need to do today, and you cross it off and you often carry it on to the next day. So I think it's good to have your own ritual of checking in and checking out. And from a group setting, well, we trust the people we work with. It's also nice to kind of verify what's going on. But what I really appreciate also is what Remote How and the Institute in general is doing, which is bringing to people's attention that this makes a lot of sense. And there are times that, remote work doesn't make sense. If I worked on a production line, I got to be there. But frankly, if I work for an insurance company, and I've worked remotely now for over 9 years between Insured Nomads and my previous employer, I felt I was much more productive. I felt I could maintain a level of sanity that you really can't if you're always going in the office. And then I think with COVID, I learned that you bring people to a centralized location, you bring people to a place that can be either a vector for getting sick, or like we see with some of these natural disasters, if everybody has to come into the same geographic area, your business continuity plans don't make a lot of sense because we're all tied in. So I really appreciate what they're doing. So I learned quite a bit today. I hope members of our audience did too. Please, if you enjoyed this podcast, tell others about the new Nomad podcast. People tend to find us through word of mouth. So once again, please continue to travel safely. Please continue to work remotely safely. And we look forward to hearing you again on another episode of the new Nomad podcast. Thank you very much.
Insured Nomads proudly supports the new Nomad podcast. Insured Nomads for the evolution of insurance, for the revolution of travel. For all your travel, medical, and support needs, please visit our website at insurednomads.com. We support our location-independent community worldwide.
Thanks for tuning in to the new Nomad podcast, where we bring together an incredible community of people and ideas that embody the nomadic spirit. Please remember to subscribe and leave a review. For more amazing tips to help you take advantage of the cross-border lifestyle, please visit us at insurednomads.com/podcast. See you next week.